Tonight, we dive into a collection of vampire stories that will blur the lines between predator and prey. These tales of immortal hunger will guide you through shadows where morality fades, and the boundaries between humanity and monstrosity dissolve with each drop of blood. If these dark narratives send a pleasant chill down your spine, please don't forget to leave a like. Consider sinking your teeth into the notification bell as well, and subscribe for more content like this. Your support helps others find the channel and become weary dreamers. But for now, dim the lights and get cozy as we traverse the eternal twilight between man and monster, personified by those timeless predators of the night, vampires. The smell of freshly turned soil clung to Eliza DeLorme's clothes as she knelt beside the grave. Not a proper grave, just a shallow depression at the edge of the forest, hastily covered and unmarked. Someone had tried to hide it with pine branches and fallen leaves, but to Eliza's trained eye, it might as well have been marked with a monument. "Sloppy," she murmured, brushing dirt from her leather gloves. "Getting careless." The autumn wind whispered through the pines surrounding the small Hungarian village of Kurseg, carrying the scent of wood smoke and soiled snow. Tucked against the Austrian border and shadowed by the Alps, the settlement had stood for centuries, its walls bearing witness to countless sieges, plagues, and winters. But the walls that had once kept Ottoman invaders at bay could do nothing against the predator now stalking its streets. Eliza rose, her knees protesting after too many nights spent sleeping in barns and on forest floors. At 43, she was well past the age when most hunters retired, or more commonly, met their end in some forgotten corner of the world. 26 years she'd been doing this work, and each winter felt colder than the last. Each new grave a little harder to accept. She unscrewed her canteen and took a swig of bitter coffee, letting the cold caffeine work its magic on her tired mind. The markers were all here. The shallow burial, the absence of blood in the body she'd briefly examined, the peculiar angle of the neck, not broken, but stretched in the way only a vampire's feeding could achieve. Her weathered journal came out next, its leather cover darkened by years of handling and stained with substances best left unidentified. Eliza made her notes methodically, the ritual as much a part of her as the silver medallion she wore beneath her woolen scarf. November 17th, 1887. Kurseg. Female victim, approximately 20 years of age. Classical feeding pattern. Third such burial found in 2 weeks. Pattern indicates nesting behavior, not transient. Must investigate castle ruins north of town. Eliza closed the journal and tucked it into her inner pocket, where it rested against the stake of rowan wood that had travelled with her across 3 continents. As she stood, something caught her eye. A scrap of deep blue fabric caught on a bramble. Carefully, she freed it and rubbed the material between her fingers. Expensive silk, not the rough homespun the villagers wore. "Found a piece of you?" she whispered to the wind, "and I'll find the rest soon enough." The Arani Sarvas Inn huddled at the edge stretch of Köseg's main square, its half-timbered facade leaning slightly as if tired after centuries of standing watch. Inside, warmth and the smell of paprika and roasting meat wrapped around Eliza like a blanket. She chose a table in the corner, her back to the wall, eyes on the door, habits that had kept her alive far longer than most who shared her profession. "What can I bring you, madam?" The innkeeper was a round man with a magnificent moustache and suspicious eyes. Foreigners were rare in Köseg, women travelling alone even rarer. "Goulash, if you have it, and information, if you're willing to sell that too." Eliza placed a silver coin on the wooden table, then covered it with her palm. "I'm interested in the castle ruins." The innkeeper's expression darkened. "The castle is nothing, just stones. Tourists sometimes visit in summer." "And in winter?" Eliza asked, releasing the coin and letting it catch the firelight. The man's gaze flicked to the silver, then back to her face. His voice dropped. "In winter, only fools go there, or those who don't wish to return." "Has anyone gone missing recently, besides the girl found in the forest 3 days ago?" The innkeeper's eyes widened. "How did you—" "It's what I do," Eliza said simply. He hesitated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "The butcher's son, the blacksmith's wife, and Katerina, the girl you mentioned, all within a month." He leaned closer. "The authorities say it's wolves, but we have lived with wolves for centuries. These are not wolf killings." "No," Eliza agreed. "They're not." The innkeeper studied her more carefully, taking in the weathered leather coat, the peculiar bulges that hinted at concealed weapons, the hard set of her jaw. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You are a hunter," he whispered, "like the man who came before." Eliza's hand froze halfway to her mug. "What man?" "An Englishman, well-dressed. He asked the same questions 2 weeks ago. Said he was tracking something dangerous." The innkeeper crossed himself. "He went to the castle, but did not return." A cold weight settled in Eliza's stomach. "This man, did he give a name?" "Harker. Jonathan Harker." The goulash turned to ash in Eliza's mouth. "Jonathan. Here. After all these years." The spoon clattered against her bowl as her hand trembled slightly. "Are you unwell, madam?" the innkeeper asked. "Fine," she managed. "The castle. How do I find it?" Night was falling as Eliza made her way through the forest path, lantern swinging from her gloved hand. The well-worn handle of her crossbow pressed reassuringly against her shoulder blade, and the weight of silver bolts clinked softly in her pocket with each step. Jonathan Harker. The name echoed with each crunch of frost beneath her boots. They had trained together in London, under the watchful eye of Abraham Van Helsing himself. Jonathan had been brilliant, meticulous, scholarly, with an almost photographic memory for vampire lore. And for 5 years, he had been more than her colleague. Until Vienna, until the night that changed everything. The path grew steeper, winding upward through increasingly dense forest. Mist curled around The castle appeared suddenly through a break in the trees, a black silhouette against the indigo sky, its broken towers like jagged teeth. Parts of it had crumbled into the valley below, but the central keep remained, defiant against time and weather. A single window glowed with faint light. "Not exactly hiding, are you?" Eliza murmured, extinguishing her lantern. She approached carefully, staying within the tree line until she reached the outer wall. The main gate hung broken from a single rusted hinge, opening onto an overgrown courtyard. Eliza slipped through, her footfalls silent on the frost-hardened ground. The inner door was ajar, not a good sign. Vampires rarely left entrances unsecured. Either this one was supremely confident, or it was expecting her. Neither possibility was comforting. Inside, the castle was a maze of crumbling corridors and collapsed chambers. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, casting long shadows across stone floors, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Eliza moved like a ghost, pausing at each intersection to listen for any sound that didn't belong to the wind or settling stone. The light she'd seen came from the top of the keep. As she climbed the spiral staircase, a faint melody reached her ears. Someone was playing a violin. The notes danced hauntingly through the darkness, a melancholy waltz that seemed to speak of ancient sorrows. At the top of the stairs, an arched doorway opened into what must once have been the Lord's chamber. Now it was transformed. Elegant furniture arranged carefully around a blazing fireplace, shelves lined with leather-bound books, Persian carpets covering the cold stone floor. A gentleman's study transplanted into this decaying fortress. And there, silhouetted against the firelight, stood a figure Eliza had never expected to see again. "Jonathan," she breathed. He turned, the violin lowering slowly. His face was just as she remembered, handsome, with intelligent eyes and a scholar's thoughtful brow. But there was something new there too, a stillness, an ageless quality that made her heart sink. "Eliza DeLorme," he said, his voice rich and melodious. "Still following in my footsteps, I see." She kept her hand near her hidden stake. "I followed the bodies, Jonathan. 3 in the village. How many more that I haven't found?" He set the violin down carefully on a table. "Only those who were necessary. I'm not wasteful." "What happened to you?" The question escaped before she could stop it, raw with the pain of 15 years of wondering. A sad smile touched his lips. "Vienna happened, my dear. That night in the opera house, when we thought we had cornered the Countess." He gestured to his neck, where Eliza now noticed the faint scarring. "You thought she had killed me. In a way, she did. You never came back. You let me believe that I was dead." Jonathan laughed softly. "I was. And then I wasn't. And then I realized what power I had been given." He moved toward a sideboard, his movements unnaturally fluid. "Would you care for a drink? I still keep a selection for guests." "I'm not here as your guest." Eliza's voice hardened. "No, you're here as a hunter." He sighed. "As I once was." "The irony isn't lost on me, Eliza." "Why Kuseg? Why now?" Jonathan poured himself a glass of dark red liquid that Eliza knew wasn't wine. "I've been traveling, learning, in the castle's original library that contained knowledge even Van Helsing never possessed. He gestured to an ancient tome open on a reading stand. Did you know there were vampires in the Carpathians 1,000 years before Vlad Tepes was even born? The secrets they left behind. Secrets worth killing for. Eliza moved slowly around the perimeter of the room, noting exits, distances, potential weapons. Knowledge always has its price, Jonathan said simply. He watched her calculating movements with amusement. You won't need the crossbow, Eliza. If I wanted to harm you, I would have done so while you were examining poor Katerina's grave. The realization that he had been watching her all along sent a chill down her spine. The blue silk I found was left deliberately. I knew a hunter would come eventually. I hoped it would be you. Why? Jonathan's expression softened. Because of all people, you might understand. You remember what Van Helsing taught us about vampire nature, that they are merely predators, soulless creatures driven by bloodlust. I remember. He was wrong. Jonathan took a step toward her. We retain everything: memory, emotion, intellect. We can choose restraint. The ones who rampage, who slaughter indiscriminately, they're the exception, not the rule. Tell that to the butcher's son, Eliza said coldly. Pain flashed across Jonathan's face. A mistake. He discovered me during daylight hours. I reacted on instinct. He set down his glass. The others were necessary. I need strength for what's coming. And what exactly is coming, Jonathan? His eyes gleamed in the firelight. A reckoning. There's a coven in Budapest. Ancient vampires who have fed on the city for centuries. They're planning something that will cost thousands of lives. A blood ritual that would give them power beyond imagining. Eliza's brow furrowed. And you expect me to believe you're going to stop them? You've become what we once hunted. I've become something else entirely. Jonathan moved to a chest near the window and withdrew a leather-bound journal that looked disturbingly similar to Eliza's own. I've spent years documenting them, tracking their movements. Here, he held the journal out to her. After a moment's hesitation, Eliza took it, careful to maintain distance between them. She flipped through pages of meticulous notes, maps, sketches of faces. It was Jonathan's handwriting, the same methodical documentation they had both been trained to maintain. Even if this is true, she said, looking up, it doesn't justify taking lives, Jonathan finished for her. How many have you taken, Eliza? How many nests have you burned? How many heads separated from bodies? We told ourselves it was justice, protection for the innocent. I'm doing the same, just from the other side of the mirror. The certainty that had carried Eliza up the mountain began to waver. The Jonathan before her spoke with the same conviction, the same moral clarity that had drawn her to him all those years ago. What do you want from me? She asked finally. Help, he admitted. In 3 days, the coven will gather beneath St. Matthias Church. I can't face them alone. Eliza stared at him. You want me to join forces with a vampire? Have you lost your mind? No, I've gained perspective. He moved closer, and it took all her will not to step back. Think of it as one last hunt together. After that, if you still believe I'm a monster who deserves destruction, I won't stop you from trying. Dawn was breaking as Eliza made her way back down the mountain path. The journal Jonathan had given her weighed heavily in her pocket, its contents even heavier on her mind. She had left without giving him an answer. The hunter in her screamed that it was a trap, that the creature wearing Jonathan's face was manipulating her with memories of the man he had once been. And yet, the village was stirring as she entered, smoke rising from chimneys as the baker opened his shop and women gathered at the well. Normal life, continuing in ignorance of the ancient predator that watched from the castle above. How many other villages had she passed through over the years, bringing death to the undead that threatened them? At the inn, she locked her door and spread Jonathan's journal on the bed. Hour after hour she read, comparing his notes to her own knowledge of vampire covens. The Budapest group was unknown to her, but his documentation was thorough. Locations, names, patterns of feeding that stretched back decades. If he was telling the truth, the ritual he described would indeed be catastrophic. If he was lying, Eliza rubbed her tired eyes. The Jonathan she had known would never have fabricated such detailed evidence. But the Jonathan she had known would never have become a vampire either. Night fell, and with it came decision time. Eliza cleaned her weapons methodically, the crossbow, the silver-edged knife, the wooden stakes. Each had served her faithfully through hundreds of hunts. Each had tasted vampire blood. Would they taste Jonathan's before this was over? A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Hand on her knife, she approached carefully. "Who is it?" "A message, madam," came the innkeeper's voice. "Left for you at the desk." Eliza opened the door a crack. The innkeeper held out a small envelope sealed with red wax. She took it with a nod of thanks and closed the door again. Inside was a train ticket to Budapest for the following morning, and a note in familiar handwriting. "Whether you come as ally or executioner, I'll be waiting at the eastern entrance. If I don't see you by midnight, I'll understand. Signed, Jonathan." Eliza sat heavily on the bed, the ticket in her hand. 26 years of hunting had taught her to trust her instincts above all else. However, she ignored what they were telling her now. St. Matthias Church rose like a fantasy against the night sky, its Gothic spires illuminated by the lights of Budapest. The Danube flowed dark and silent below, carrying the reflections of the city's splendor. Eliza moved through the shadows of the church courtyard, her hunter's garb exchanged for the elegant dress of a society woman, a disguise that let her move freely through the Hungarian capital. Beneath the finery, however, she remained armed, silver daggers strapped to her thighs, a miniature crossbow hidden beneath her cloak. The eastern entrance was a small door, partially concealed behind a stone buttress. As she approached, a figure separated from the darkness. "You came," Jonathan said softly. He too was transformed. Gone was the reclusive scholar of the castle, replaced by a gentleman in evening clothes, his hair neatly combed, his bearing aristocratic. "I'm still deciding why," Eliza answered truthfully. He offered a sad smile. "Fair enough." From inside his coat, he withdrew a small vial of dark liquid. "Take this. It's my blood." Eliza recoiled. "What?" "Insurance," he explained. "If I betray you, if this is a trap, drinking this would give you temporary immunity to vampire influence. Enough to escape, at least." Reluctantly, She took the vial, tucking it into her bodice. How do we do this? The coven meets in the crypt. There's a hidden chamber beneath the main level that predates the church itself. Jonathan produced a key of ancient design. This will get us in. Once inside, we observe only. We need to confirm the ritual preparations before we act. And if they sense us, his eyes met hers, a hint of red gleaming in their depths. Then we fight, like old times. The key turned silently in the ancient lock. Beyond lay a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. Jonathan led the way, his preternatural vision guiding them where Eliza would have needed a lantern. The main crypt was a solemn place of stone sarcophagi and memorial tablets. Jonathan moved confidently to a far wall where a carving of an angel spread its wings. His fingers traced a pattern across the stone face, and with a grating sound, a section of wall swung inward. "How did you find this?" Eliza whispered. "I followed one of them months ago. Nearly didn't escape with my existence." He touched a scar visible at his collar. Some vampires are older than others. The ones below, they're ancient. The hidden passage descended deeper, the air growing cold and thick with the scent of earth and something else, a metallic tang that Eliza recognized as old blood. Finally, they emerged onto a narrow ledge overlooking a circular chamber carved from the bedrock beneath the church. Below, a dozen figures moved around a central altar. They appeared human at first glance, elegantly dressed men and women of various ages, but their movements had the same unnatural grace Eliza had observed in Jonathan. On the altar lay a girl, no more than 16, unconscious or drugged. Surrounding her were ancient artifacts, golden bowls, obsidian knives, and a large crystal that seemed to pulse with an inner light. "The sacrifice," Jonathan whispered. "The vessel for the ritual." Eliza felt sick. "We need to stop this now." "Wait." Jonathan's hand closed around her wrist. "Look at the leader." Eliza focused on the tall figure directing the preparations. With a shock, she recognized him, not personally, but from her own research. Count Orlok, a vampire lord thought destroyed a century earlier in Prussia. "If he's alive," she breathed, "then everything we know about destroying the most powerful vampires is wrong," Jonathan finished. "This is why I needed you. Your experience, your skills." Below, the ritual was beginning. The vampires formed a circle around the altar, hands joined, voices raised in a chant so ancient the language was unrecognizable. The crystal began to glow more intensely, casting eerie shadows across the cavernous space. "Now," Jonathan said, "we need to destroy the crystal first." He moved with blinding speed, dropping from the ledge to land in the midst of the startled coven. Eliza was only seconds behind, her crossbow coming up smoothly to send a silver bolt through the chest of the nearest creature. Chaos erupted. The ancient vampires were powerful, but surprised. Jonathan fought with a ferocity that stunned Eliza. He moved faster, struck harder than any vampire she had ever hunted. Within moments, 3 of the coven lay truly dead, their hearts pierced or heads separated from bodies. Eliza fought her way to the altar, dispatching another vampire with her silver dagger. The girl lay pale and still, her pulse faint but present. The crystal pulsed brighter, responding to the violence around it. "Eliza, the crystal!" Jonathan barked, locked in combat with two vampires. She raised her crossbow, took aim, and felt a cold hand close around her throat from behind. "Hunter!" hissed Count Orlok, his face inhuman with rage. "You dare interrupt our ascension!" His strength was overwhelming, lifting her from the ground as her lungs screamed for air. Through darkening vision, she saw Jonathan break free from his opponents and race toward her. With her last conscious thought, Eliza reached for the vial hidden in her bodice, smashed it against Orlok's arm, and felt the vampire blood splash across both of them. The effect was immediate. Orlok screamed, releasing her as his skin began to smoke where the blood had touched. Eliza fell to the floor, gasping, as Jonathan reached them. "Now you understand," Jonathan said, driving a stake through Orlok's heart as the ancient vampire writhed in agony. "My blood, vampire blood freely given, is poison to those who take without consent." The Count's body collapsed into dust, his centuries of existence ending in an instant. Around them, the remaining vampires fell back in horror and fear. Jonathan turned to the crystal, still pulsing on the altar. With a single powerful blow, he shattered it, releasing a shockwave that knocked everyone to the ground. The fragments dissolved into mist that dissipated into nothing. "It's done," he said, helping Eliza to her feet. "The ritual is broken." Dawn was approaching as they emerged from the church, the unconscious girl safely delivered to a nearby hospital. The eastern sky was lightening, the stars fading one by one. "You need to find shelter," Eliza said, looking at Jonathan. "The sun will be rising soon," he agreed, "but I have a safe place nearby." They walked in silence through the emptying streets, their shared victory creating a strange bond neither had anticipated. "What will you do now?" Eliza finally asked. Jonathan considered the question. "Continue my work. There are other covens, other threats." He glanced at her. "And you?" "The same, I suppose, though my understanding of what I'm hunting has evolved." They stopped at a crossroads. One street led toward the river and the luxury hotels where Eliza had taken a room. The other led into older, darker parts of the city. "I won't ask you to spare all of my kind," Jonathan said softly. "Many deserve your justice. But perhaps I'll look more carefully before I strike," Eliza finished. "Judge the predator by their actions, not merely their nature." A smile touched his lips. "That's all I can ask." The sky continued to brighten. Jonathan took a step back toward the shadows. "Vienna was a lifetime ago," Eliza said suddenly. "For both of us." "Yes," he agreed, "but some bonds transcend death itself." He reached into his coat and withdrew a small object, a silver locket she recognized immediately. Her hand went to her throat, where an identical piece had hung for 20 years. "I kept it," he said simply, "to remember what I had been, who I had loved." Eliza took the locket, feeling its familiar weight. Inside would be the portrait miniature she had given him before that fateful night at the Vienna Opera. "Will I see you again?" she asked. Jonathan looked toward toward the lightening sky. I suspect our paths will cross. Whether as allies or adversaries remains to be seen. He bowed formally, a gesture from another century. Until then, Eliza DeLorme, keep your lantern burning in the darkness. Then he was gone, moving with that unnatural grace into the shadows of Budapest. Eliza stood alone at the crossroads, the locket in her hand, the weight of her weapons familiar against her body. The sun rose over the Danube, casting golden light across the ancient city. Eliza tucked the locket into her pocket and turned toward her hotel. There would be another hunt, another village, another monster. But perhaps, she thought, not all monsters wore the same face. And perhaps even in darkness, one could find unexpected light. The scent of cruelty has a particular tang to it, metallic, like blood, but soured with something rancid underneath. After 4 centuries, I've learned to pick it out from blocks away. Tonight, it led me to him. I watched from the fire escape as he locked his apartment door, checking it twice before heading down the street. Martin Carlyle, 43, elementary school janitor. His outward appearance, unremarkable height, thinning hair, department store clothes, was the perfect camouflage for what festered inside. I'd been tracking him for 3 weeks, observing, confirming. My kind must be selective. We may be monsters, predators of the night who feast on blood, but even vampires maintain certain principles. Mine is simple. I feed only on those who prey on innocence, the truly vile, the irredeemable. Martin qualified. I followed him through the night-empty streets, keeping to shadows. He moved with purpose, checking his watch repeatedly. The hunter's anticipation radiated from him. He believed himself the predator tonight. How mistaken he was. At the corner of Maple and 4th, he paused, scanning the area before ducking into West Side Park. I knew this route now. The park connects to the neighborhood where a woman, Elise Perez, lives with her 8-year-old daughter. Their apartment faced the small playground. 3 nights ago, I caught Martin photographing their windows. The first night I followed him, I wasn't certain. I slipped into his apartment while he slept, searching for evidence. What I found in his locked desk drawer, trophies from previous victims, carefully catalogued photographs, small personal items, confirmed everything. Tonight would be his last hunt. I moved ahead of him, taking a parallel path through the trees. The park was empty this late. Empty except for us and the occasional homeless person asleep on a bench. Martin avoided them. They weren't his preferred prey. When he reached the playground, I decided to begin our game. I I stepped on a branch deliberately, the crack echoing through the quiet park. Martin froze, turning toward the sound. "Hello," he called, voice steady despite the spike in his heart rate that my heightened senses detected. I remained silent, invisible in the darkness. He continued walking, his pace quickening now, casting furtive glances over his shoulder. I made another noise, a subtle whisper of movement, just enough to keep his unease simmering. The sound was soft, barely audible, but in the stillness of the night, it was enough to send a shiver down his spine. "Who's there?" he demanded, his hand moving instinctively to his jacket pocket. The knife was there, a cold comfort against his fingers. 5 inches of polished steel, its serrated edge gleaming dully in the faint moonlight. He'd used it before, knew the weight of it, the feel of it slicing through the air, and more. I stepped onto the path, 30 yards behind him, allowing him a brief glimpse of my silhouette before melting back into the darkness. It was a calculated move, designed to unnerve him, to make him question what he'd seen. The shadows embraced me, hiding me from his view as effectively as a cloak. I was there one moment, gone the next, leaving only the echo of my presence to haunt him. "Hey!" he called, turning fully now, hand gripping the knife through his pocket. "I see you following me. What do you want?" What I wanted was for him to reveal himself, the true self he kept hidden behind his ordinary facade. I circled around, moving with inhuman speed, and appeared on the path ahead of him. "Jesus," he gasped, stumbling backward. "What the hell, man?" I stood motionless, studying him. I appeared human enough, my kind always does. But something in my stillness, my eyes perhaps, triggered ancient instincts. The prey, recognizing the predator. "You've been following me," he said, voice steadying as he regained composure. The knife was in his hand now, held low against his leg. "That's not a smart thing to do. I've been watching you, Martin," I said, my voice soft, yet carrying clearly through the night air. His expression shifted. "How do you know my name?" "I know many things about you. Your apartment on Birch Street, your job at Westwood Elementary, your special interests." Fear flashed across his face, quickly replaced by calculation. He was weighing options, deciding whether to flee or fight. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, taking a step backward. "But I'm not looking for trouble." "Aren't you? Isn't that precisely what brings you to this park, night after night? Looking for trouble, looking for them?" His eyes narrowed. "You're crazy. Stay away from me." I stepped closer. The Lopez boy. 2 years ago. They never found who did it. Martin's pulse quickened, his scent spiking with adrenaline and something darker. Pride. "I don't know anything about that," he said, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward involuntarily. "And the Chen girl last summer, and now you've been watching the Perez apartment." His facade cracked. The smile that spread across his face transformed him, revealing the creature beneath the man. "You can't prove anything," he said, voice dropping to a whisper. "Nobody can." "I don't need to prove it, Martin. I'm not the police." His grip tightened on the knife. "Then what do you want? Money? Is this blackmail?" I laughed, the sound utterly devoid of humor. "I want you to show me who you really are." He lunged then, knife slashing toward my throat with practiced precision. I sidestepped easily, letting the blade pass through empty air. "There you are," I whispered. His attack was fluid, confident, not his first time using the knife. He advanced, slashing methodically, herding me toward the trees. I allowed it, curious to see how he operated. "You picked the wrong person to follow," he hissed, eyes alive with excitement now. "I've done this before." "I know," I replied calmly. 7 times, by my count." His expression flickered between surprise and pleasure. 8, actually. There was one they never connected to me. Confession. They always confessed eventually. Something in my presence compelled it. Perhaps they sensed on some primal level that they were facing judgment. I backed against a tree, feigning fear. "Please, I won't tell anyone." He advanced, confidence growing. "No, you won't. But first, I want to know how you found out about me." "I can smell it on you," I said truthfully. He laughed. "You're insane." "What were you going to do to the Perez girl?" I asked. His eyes gleamed in the darkness. "She's special. I've been planning for weeks. The mother works nights every Thursday. Tonight, I have a room prepared in the basement of the school, soundproofed. She could last for days." The casual way he described his intentions confirmed everything. Some humans carried evil like a disease, infecting everything they touched. In centuries past, villages would have recognized him as a monster and dealt with him accordingly. Modern society had lost that instinct, trusting in systems that often failed. But I had not lost the instinct. He lunged forward, knife aimed at my abdomen. This time, I caught his wrist. He gasped at my strength, at the unnatural coldness of my grip. "What the hell?" I smiled, allowing him to see my true nature for the first time. His eyes widened as my teeth extended. "You?" he gasped. You're not human," I finished for him. "No, neither are you, in any way that matters." Fear, real fear, blossomed in his eyes now. He struggled against my grip, knife clattering to the ground. "Please," he begged, his bravado deflating. "I need help. I'm sick. I can get treatment." "Would you have listened if the Chen girl had begged?" I asked softly. "Or the Lopez boy?" His face contorted, the mask of normalcy falling away completely. "They deserved it," he snarled. "Little teases. Acting so innocent. They wanted it." The last vestiges of doubt vanished. Some souls were beyond redemption. No, Martin. The only one who deserves what's coming is you. I pulled him closer, his struggles futile against my strength. I could smell the evil in his blood, the corruption that had festered there his entire life. It would taste bitter, tainted. It always did with his kind. But I would drink it regardless, remove him from the world of innocence he preyed upon. "What are you?" he whispered, final words of a monster confronting a greater one. "Justice," I telepathically replied, teeth sinking into his throat. His blood flooded my mouth, carrying with it flashes of his victims. Their terror, their pain. I took it all, absorbing their suffering along with his life. This was my burden, my penance, to carry the evil of those I removed from this world. When it was done, I carried his empty body deeper into the woods, where it wouldn't be found for days. By then, I would be hunting another deserving soul in another city. I am a monster who preys on monsters, a predator of predators. And tonight, justice had been served. Jack's eyelids fluttered open, heavy as lead curtains, resisting the pull of consciousness. Cold rain pelted him from above, igniting his senses. The world around him crept into focus, revealing a hazy tableau of brick walls and overflowing dumpsters, their contents spilling out onto the wet base of the alley. He lay sprawled on the cold, damp pavement, his limbs unresponsive and his mind swimming. What happened? The question echoed in the foggy corners of his mind as he struggled to piece together the fragments of memory. Slowly, images began to coalesce. A woman. Yes, that was it. A woman with cascading dark hair and eyes that seemed to glow in the dim streetlights. Jack's lips curled into a smile as he recalled following her into this very alley. His pulse quickened at the thought of what he'd planned to do to the raven-tressed beauty. It was a familiar dance, one he'd performed countless times before. The thrill of the hunt, the exquisite moment when fear blossomed in their eyes, and then, well, Jack had long since perfected the art of making bodies disappear. Yet, what had happened after he followed her into the alley? As he waited for his memories to fully form, Jack was at least relieved to feel a surge of vitality course through his veins. The deathly pallor that had gripped him moments ago began to fade, replaced by a healthy flush. He flexed his fingers, relishing the return of sensation and strength. Yet, as he started to move, a dull pain throbbed in his neck. Jack reached towards the source, feeling 2 puncture wounds. That's odd. As he began to question how they got there, a flash of movement caught his eye, subtle yet unmistakable. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. His predator's instinct honed over over years of stalking the shadows, screamed a warning. He wasn't alone. His eyes darted from side to side, scanning the alley for any sign of movement. The shadows seemed to deepen, taking on an almost sentient quality. He strained his ears, listening for the slightest rustle or breath that might betray another presence. "Who's there?" he called out, hating the tremor that had crept into his voice. Other than the sound of a nearby alley cat scurrying away, only silence answered him. Jack scrambled to his feet, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife he always kept concealed in his boot. His fingers closed around empty air. Panic clawed at his throat. Where was his weapon? What had happened to the woman? And why did he lose consciousness, waking up in this wet alley that was meant to be a testament to his latest conquest? Jack stumbled to his feet, his legs still unsteady beneath him. The alley stretched before him like a dark maw ready to swallow him whole. He shook his head, trying to clear the last wisps of fog from his mind. It was time to leave, to retreat to the safety of his secluded home and piece together what had happened. He took a step forward, then froze. Footsteps echoed behind him, a slow, deliberate rhythm that sent ice cascading down his spine. Jack's breath caught in his throat, his heart pounding a frantic beat against his ribs. He wanted to run, to flee from whatever lurked in the shadows, but his feet remained rooted. No, he thought, forcing himself to take a deep breath. It's just paranoia. You're Jack the Knife, for Christ's sake. Every newspaper and tabloid in the tri-state area has written about your exploits. Who could possibly hurt you? Jack squared his shoulders, a sardonic smile playing across his lips. He'd let his imagination run wild for a moment there, like some snot-nosed kid afraid of the boogeyman. But he was no kid, and he sure as hell wasn't afraid. "You're losing your edge, Jackie boy," he muttered to himself, chuckling softly. "Next thing you know, you'll be jumping at your own shadow." The thought of anyone getting the drop on him was laughable. How many times had he stalked these very streets, his prey never suspecting a thing until it was far too late? He was the predator, the apex hunter. The idea that someone could turn the tables on him was absurd. Jack's confidence surged back, a warm rush that chased away the last of his unease. He flexed his fingers, missing the familiar weight of his knife, but no longer feeling naked without it. After all, his hands were weapons enough when it came down to it. "All right, whoever you are," he hissed, voice dripping with malice. "You had your fun, but playtime's over now. Why don't you come on out and face me like a man?" The words echoed through the stillness of the night, a challenge wrapped in bravado. He stood tall, convinced that his confidence alone would scare away anyone dumb enough to mistake him for a mark. Silence lingered, seeming to confirm his suspicions. "That's what I thought," he spat as he exited the concrete chasm. Jack approached his car, the metallic jingle of his keys ringing out like an unsettling chime, each sound echoing his rising anxiety. The bravado that he'd feigned earlier faded like smoke in the wind, giving way to a gnawing unease that coiled tightly in his neck. The street lamps struggled overhead, projecting shadows that crept across the pavement, flickering in and out of existence like ominous spectres. He fumbled with the lock, eager to return to the comfort of his lair, even if it meant sadly returning empty-handed, no lock of hair, not even a pair of torn panties to add to his collection. Jack opened the door with slumped shoulders, yet a flicker of movement caught his eye. His breath hitched as he spotted the woman lurking at the edge of the alley. Her silhouette was unmistakable, curves accentuated by the play of light and shadow, dark hair cascading over her shoulders like a waterfall reflecting the midnight sky. Their eyes met, and he felt a jolt of primal electricity course through his body. Perhaps he would have some fun tonight after all. Jack swore he could see a smile tug on the woman's lips, as if she were reading his thoughts. Well, not all of his thoughts, he mused as he closed his car door, turning to make his way towards her. As he drew closer, however, the woman retreated deeper into the shadows. Her smile never wavered, beckoning him forward with silent promises. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Was this the same woman he'd followed earlier? The one he'd intended to make his latest victim? Dark possibilities blazed through his mind as he pursued the mysterious woman deeper into the shadows. The thrill of the hunt coursed through his veins as he planned his next moves. Should he strike quickly, ending her life in a swift, efficient manner? Or should he savor the moment, drawing out her fear and his own twisted pleasure? Deep down he knew he'd been getting sloppy lately, bolder in his pursuits, lingering far too long on the deed itself. I should be quick this time, he thought. And yet, the allure of prolonging the encounter, of reveling in her terror, tugged at the darker recesses of his psyche. As he deliberated, Jack barely noticed the subtle shift in the air around him, the way the shadows seemed to deepen. The usual sounds of the city faded away, replaced by an eerie silence that began to press against him. He looked towards the woman just as she faded into the darkened depths of the alley. Her eyes gleamed with an otherworldly knowledge, as if she were privy to some cosmic joke at his expense. A musky cocktail of desire and excitement bubbled up within him. This chase was different, more thrilling than any he'd experienced before. His lips curled into a feral grin as he imagined the moment he'd finally corner her, savoring the fear in her eyes before. But wait, where was she? His excitement began to curdle into frustration as he searched the alley. His eyes darted from shadow to shadow, seeking any hint of her silhouette. He peered behind dumpsters, checked doorways, even glanced up at fire escapes. Nothing. The alley stretched before him, maddeningly empty. His breath came in short, sharp gasps as he spun in circles, desperate for any sign of his prey. The exhilaration that had fueled him moments ago drained away, leaving behind a gnawing uncertainty. For the first time in years, Jack felt his iron grip on control slipping. He was the hunter, the one who stalked the night and chose his victims at will. Yet here he stood, alone in an empty alley, chasing sultry shadows. Damn tease, he murmured. Jack whirled around, ready to abandon this fruitless chase and retreat to his car. His heart hammered against his ribs, frustrated at the anticlimactic turn of events. As he took his first step to exit the dark alley, a sudden chill coursed through the marrow of his bones. The air behind him shifted, carrying with it the faintest whisper of movement. Jack froze, every muscle in his body tensing as he sensed a presence materializing from the very shadows shadows he'd been searching. Slowly he turned, his breath catching in his throat as he looked upon the woman he'd been pursuing. She stood mere yards away, her dark eyes boring into his with an alluring intensity that made his blood run south. "Oh, are you done playing hard to get now?" he scoffed. As he slowly approached, her beauty became even more breathtaking, a perfection that seemed almost otherworldly. For a moment, Jack's predatory instincts warred with a newfound sense of awe. He'd never encountered anyone quite like her before. There was something in her gaze that spoke of sinful secrets and hidden desires, a magnetism that begged him to make this hunt last. "I should tie her up afterward and take her back to my place," Jack mused. But as he stared, transfixed, a chilling metamorphosis began to unfold before his eyes. The woman's alluring smile twisted, transforming into something far more sinister. The soft curves of her face sharpened, taking on an almost animalistic quality. Jack watched in horrified fascination as her incisors elongated, tapering to razor-sharp points. Realization dawned on him with sickening clarity. He wasn't the predator here. He was the prey. All along, she'd been leading him deeper into her territory, playing with him like a cat toying with a mouse. Before he could react, the woman lunged forward with inhuman speed. She moved like a beam of light, covering the distance in a terrifying instant. He felt a searing heat press down against his neck. The world exploded into a whirlwind of sensation as the woman's fangs pierced his flesh. Pain blossomed, hot and fierce, but alongside it came a deluge of memories, each one a vivid tableau of his past victims. There was the brunette outside the tavern, her eyes wide with trust as he spun a tale of a hurt puppy needing her help. "He's just around the corner," Jack had said, feigning urgency and compassion. Another flash, this time of a redhead in a parking lot, shivering in the cold as she waited for her ride. Jack had approached her with a sympathetic smile, offering the warmth of his car and a chance to charge her dying phone. "I've got a charger in my car," he told her. "You're welcome to wait inside. It's no trouble at all." The images came faster now, a grotesque slideshow of his exploits. The blonde in the abandoned building, lured by promises of an exclusive art show. "There's a private viewing tonight," he'd said, a conspiratorial whisper, and the possibility of selling her artwork to a rich collector. Then there was the auburn-haired beauty he lured back to his home, hesitant at first, but swayed by his fabricated tale of woe. "I just need someone to talk to," Jack had confided, the picture of vulnerability. "My girlfriend, she left me. And, well, I could really use a friend right now." Each memory was the same, all beautiful, kind-hearted women, each ending in muffled screams. Their names, Jack had long since forgotten, or never knew at all. Women who'd placed their trust in him, lowering their guard in response to his carefully crafted lies, all repaid with assault and deadly betrayal. "Relax, Jack," a soft voice echoed inside his mind. It was the woman, the raven-tressed beauty who held him in her predatory grip. He even knew her name, Lizula. Although, how exactly he knew that, he couldn't say. "Jack, I just need someone to talk to. You see, my girlfriend just left me and, well, I could really use a friend. The voice purred, mockery woven within the mental message. The woman's grip tightened, her icy fingers digging into his shoulders like steel talons as she drank deeply, greedily. The sickening sound of her swallowing echoed in Jack's ears, a tribal bass fading to its finale. His strength waned, his struggles growing weaker as his lifeblood was slowly siphoned away. With each pull, the alley spun faster, the grimy brick walls closing in around him as his vision began to darken at the edges, the dim streetlight above flickering ominously. And yet, even as his body trembled, a part of Jack reveled in the experience. This was power in its purest form, raw and primal. Suddenly, the taste of iron greeted Jack's lips, and his senses ignited back to life. The woman was kissing him, her tongue probing his mouth vigorously as a warm, metallic fluid passed between them. With a jolt of realization, Jack understood. It was his own blood she was feeding him. The intimacy of the act was both repulsive and intoxicating. His mind reeled, caught between disgust and a perverse fascination. Lizula's telepathic whispers reached him through the haze of conflicting emotions. Her voice spread through his mind like silk and honey. Don't worry, Jack. The knife, my dear sweet killer. I'm going to offer you more than just death. I offer true power and ever-lasting life, she assured him, their lips parting as she gazed upon him. Jack's mind latched onto her words, his ever-present desire for control flaring to life, even in the face of death. You've always craved power, haven't you, Jack? She cooed, her actual voice even more tantalizing, despite the crimson dripping from her lips. I can sense it in your blood, taste it on your skin. What if I told you I can give it to you? Jack's thoughts swirled, a mixture of fear and fascination. He wanted to respond, but found himself without the strength to form words. Lizula continued, her voice a seductive caress. Imagine, Jack, never having to fear death again. Strength beyond your wildest dreams. All of this could be yours if you're willing to embrace the darkness. Her words coiled around him like tendrils of smoke, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Her fangs pressed against his neck again. Images flashed through Jack's mind, visions of himself moving with supernatural speed, commanding the shadows, ruling the night. His heart raced despite the loss of blood. Yes, Lizula whispered in his thoughts, sensing his interest. You could become so much more than you ever dreamed possible. All you have to do is surrender to me. Let go of your mortal coil, and I'll show you wonders beyond imagination. Ever-lasting life, she purred against his ear. Eternity stretching before you. Power beyond your wildest dreams. No more hiding in the shadows. You could rule them. Jack's mind reeled with possibilities as Lizula's honeyed words seeped into his consciousness. The pain in his neck faded to a dull throb, overshadowed by the intoxicating promise of power beyond his wildest dreams. His ego, always a formidable force, swelled at the thought of transcending his mortal limitations. "Yes," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Make me immortal." Lizula's lips curved into a smile as she renewed her efforts with vigor. Jack's knees buckled, but her iron grip held him upright. As his life force drained away, vivid fantasies bloomed in his mind's eye. He saw himself stalking the night, no longer constrained by human frailties. In his visions, he moved like smoke through darkened streets, his victims never sensing his presence until it was far too late. The fear in their eyes as they realized their fate sent shivers of morbid delight through him. Jack reveled in the imagined power, drunk on the idea of becoming the ultimate predator. But as the woman continued to drink, Jack's fantasies began to waver. The edges of his vision grew dim, the alley around him fading into a hazy blur. A creeping coldness spread through his limbs, replacing the earlier warmth of excitement. Doubt, sharp and sudden, pierced through his ego-driven haze. Jack tried to push the woman away, but his arms felt leaden, refusing to respond to his commands. Panic clawed at his throat as he realized the terrible mistake he'd made. "Wait," he gasped, his voice barely more than a whisper. I changed my mind." But she paid no heed to his feeble protests. Her grip tightened, and Jack felt the last vestiges of his strength ebbing away. The world tilted and spun around him, reality blurring into a black void. The woman's voice slithered into Jack's mind once more, dripping with condescension and mockery. It reverberated through his skull, each word a dagger of ice piercing his fading consciousness. "Oh, you pitiful creature," she hissed, her tone laced with venom. "Did you truly believe I would grant you the gift of eternity?" Jack tried to respond, but his lips refused to move. His eyelids fluttered, struggling to stay open as darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. "I would sooner devour my own beating heart," she continued, her words echoing in the void of his mind, "than share even a moment of immortality with the likes of you." A chill ran down Jack's spine, colder than the numbness already spreading through his body. The finality of her statement crashed over him like a tidal wave, extinguishing the last flickering embers of hope. As consciousness slipped away, Jack's final thought was a bitter realization. He, the consummate predator, had fallen prey to the oldest trick in the book, seduced by his own dark appetites and led willingly to his demise. The alley, which had moments ago been a stage for his macabre desires, now felt like a tomb closing in around him. His lips moved, forming words he could barely hear, pleas for mercy that fell on deaf ears. Memories flashed before his eyes, a tapestry of past victims and missed opportunities. Jack saw their faces, heard their cries, felt their fear. But this time, he was the one trembling in terror. The weight of his actions crashed down upon him, each life he'd taken, now a stone on his soul, dragging him deeper into the abyss. He tried to struggle, to summon one last burst of strength, but his body refused to obey. Jack's limbs were completely numb, his muscles unresponsive. The coldness that had started in his extremities now crept towards his core, an icy tide extinguishing the last embers of his life. In his final moments, Jack experienced a clarity he'd never known before. The thrill of the hunt, the rush of power he'd so eagerly chased, now seemed hollow and meaningless. He saw himself as he truly was, not a cunning predator, but a scared small man who had lashed out at the world in a desperate attempt to feel strong. As darkness closed in around him, Jack's whispered pleas grew fainter. His last conscious thought was a desperate hope that someone, anyone, might hear his cries and save him from this fate. But the alley remained silent, indifferent to his suffering, as she drained the last drops of life from his body. Lizula stepped back, her obsidian eyes gleaming with satisfaction as she looked down upon Jack's lifeless body, crumpled on the alley floor. A thin trickle of blood ran down his neck, a stark contrast to his now pallid skin. The once feared predator, reduced to nothing more than a discarded husk. She ran her tongue over her lips, savoring the last traces of his essence. There was a unique flavor to the blood of evil men, a potency that ordinary victims lacked. It was an invigorating cocktail of darkness and power, one that Lizula had cultivated a taste for over her long existence. "Ah, Jack," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the rain. "You were a fine vintage indeed. Such delicious malevolence, such exquisite cruelty." Her gaze swept over his form one last time, taking in the tableau of his demise. It was a scene she had witnessed countless times before, yet it never failed to stir something primal within her. The hunter becoming the hunted. The circle of predation complete. With a fluid grace that belied her true nature, the dark-haired beauty began to recede into the shadows of the alley. Lizula's final words hung in the air, a chilling epitaph for the man who had thought himself invincible. "Sleep well, little killer. Your hunt is over, but mine is eternal." Her fingers danced over her body as she went on. "For the world is filled with your kind, and oh, how I love the blood of evil men." With that, she vanished, leaving behind nothing but silence and the pale body of Jack the Knife, a man who'd finally reaped what he had so consistently and enthusiastically sown. The alley stood as a silent witness to the night's hunt and the thrilling promise of more to come.